One of the biggest problems with go-to-market and GTM engineering for B2B outbound is this idea of list management and deduplication. So what I want to talk about here is that dynamic, what that means, and then also what you can do about it. So you can see here, let's say that you just started with a new client. Let's say you're a cold email outbound agency, or let's say you're a RevOps person, or even let's say that you have your own company, but you're managing your own process for running your own campaigns. Either way, you are going to start somewhere. So let's say that this is your first week doing it. And let's say that you're using Clay as an example, the tool that allows you to enrich contacts and do a bunch of cool stuff, enrich emails, you can do AI copywriting. And let's say that you do a fresh web scrape. You just used Appify, for example, or you pulled data from some database, whether it's Apollo using Appify, whether it's using some type of web scraping tool, or whether it's some other database. For example, maybe you go into ocean.io to get lookalikes. Either way, you've pulled down some companies and contact records. Now you might have multiple contacts people at the company. So you might have one company for every two contacts. Obviously, this will change. What happens here is ideally you have some way to put it into a central database to track all of this information. Some people will use the CRM as the central database. But stay with me here for a second. So you've done your first load. You have 10,000 companies and you have 20,000 contacts. Easy, right? The problem is that then comes week two. So now you're doing a separate campaign. You're about to pull more leads. You're about to pull more contacts. So you go back out to the web. You go back to Appify. You pull up Apollo and you scrape another 5,000 companies and say some more contacts. Now you've already pulled the 10,000 companies and the 20,000 contacts. So the question is, did you pull duplicates? The reason this matters is because obviously you don't want to send to the same people you've sent to previously. You also don't want to re-enrich the data you've already re-enriched. It's a waste of time, effort, and money. And obviously, if you do this for many clients and you're an agency, that time and energy wasted and the cost of Clay credits and also just enriching in general is just a huge suck of time. And also it kills your profitability because your GTM engineers are wasting their time rather than spending effort on other more important things. You want to check for duplicates. You would do that against a central database if you have it, but most people don't have this. Most people have scattered spreadsheets and CSV files and Clay tables, especially because of the limit on rows. So for example, Clay only has 50,000 rows per table. So if you have a 500,000 person TAM, obviously that doesn't apply in this case, then you are out of luck. You have to go to a bunch of different tables and then you have to deduplicate across those tables. I've seen people export to CSV, do VLOOKUP. There's different ways to do it, but it's difficult, it's annoying, it's frustrating, it's easy to lose access to where the full list is. Ideally, you have a central database, but most people don't. Now, let's ask, is there a duplicate from these new 5,000 companies and 5,000 contacts? So we come over here and the answer is, if yes, mark in Clay. Ideally, you're working in Clay. You can also do this in a CSV sheet. But let's say in an ideal world, if you're using Clay, you then want to see in Clay, okay, pull from the central database and mark it as yes if there's an existing contact. And in this case, you don't want to continue to enrich that record because obviously you've already done that to some degree. Now, if no, then you can see there's 3,000 new companies because remember, we started with, let's go back over here, 5,000 companies and 5,000 contacts that were what we thought new in the fresh web scrape. But it turns out after scraping the web and checking for duplicates against the central database, that there's actually 2,000 companies that are duplicates and 1,000 contacts that are duplicates. So in this case, there's 3,000 new companies and there's 4,000 new contacts. Make sense? So now in this case, ideally, you're going and loading only the new ones to the central database. So now you have a total, as you can see here, of 13,000 companies and you have 24,000 contacts. Okay. And that's your safekeeping so that the next time in week 3, when you come down here, you'll be able to then repeat this step so that you now have an updated version in the central database. But again, if you're not using a central database, now you just have a bunch more web scrapes sitting in all these different Clay tables and it creates compounding mess. So the further you go into the work, so let's say you're in week 7, 8, 15, 58, whatever. The point is that you're going to continue to compound with more and more web scrapes. You keep doing the web scrapes quite often and it becomes more difficult over time. So now ideally, you've now loaded the 3,000 new companies at 4,000 new contacts into a new column. And then you only enrich the 3,000 new companies in the 4,000 new contacts, not the ones that are duplicates. So you just saved yourself several thousand Clay credits and effort and time to go enrich. And you can just go ahead and do that. This is what it looks like where you have a bunch of different siloed, scattered spreadsheets across the web. So you have your web scrapes not used yet. So let's say you pulled them down, but they're not yet in a campaign and you haven't been using them yet for outbound. Whether you're doing cold email, whether you're doing some type of hey reach or prosp, LinkedIn DMs, whether you're doing cold calling lists, the bottom line is you've done a web scrape. It hasn't gone anywhere yet. So it's just sitting there and it's not in your CRM because it's still in the raw format. So they're in Clay tables, they're in Google Sheets, spread around. If you're doing an agency model, you might have multiple clients that have this going on. If you're doing it for yourself, you have this just for yourself, but it compounds with more clients. So now you can see here, there's a client qualified list. So you're in HubSpot, client list. And what I mean by client is that if it's a agency who has a client and it's their client's list, that's that's the scenario here. Or if it's just your list, it's just the client list. Either way, you want to know both what the current client list is, because you obviously don't want to be prospecting to them using cold outbound. And also you want to know who's qualified from the outbound you've already done. Both of these lists are important to essentially do not contact. And then there's a separate thing here over here, which is a do not contact list, which might be different than these two, even though they're technically all on the do not contact list. So in this scenario, in your sequencer or your outbound sending platform, you will have probably some type of way of marking that there is a unsubscribe, or they just don't want to be sent to it again for whatever reason. And you could also have people that are manually marked in the CRM by the sales team. So technically you could actually have this as well over here, because the sales team might have talked to a guy on the phone. He said, never contact me again. I'm on the do not contact list. So it could be from sequencing tools. It could be from the CRM, but there's do not contact lists you don't want to reach out to again. And same thing with recently sent to lists. Even though you have scraped them and you have loaded them into the sequencer and you've recently sent to them, you don't want to send to people more than every, say, 60 to 90 days, because you're going to burn out your total addressable market. So in this scenario, you have a situation where you certainly want to make sure you know when you last sent to them. Now, why does that matter? It matters because when you are doing this, coming back down to this scenario here, and you need to do this duplicate check, you're not just checking against the original web scrape. You're checking it against a far more complex series of databases, which is all of this stuff up here, or at least you should be. And if you're not, then you're probably resending to the same people, or you're burning your TAM, or you're just creating a mess of data. I use this simple example down here just to make it seem, okay, there's just the original sends, the original web scrape, and the new web scrape, but you actually have to consider all these other databases. So that is why we highly recommend using a central database. And that's exactly why we built the tool called ReviOps. It is a central database. It's specifically made to work alongside Clay instantly, and Bison, and SmartLead, HubSpot. It syncs all of those places, all of these different web scrapes and client lists and do not contact lists and recently sent to lists all into one place so you can manage your data. This way, every single time you do this, you actually do have what I originally said, which is this idea of a central database that you can check against. Rather than pulling 20 different spreadsheets and then individually checking them in different tabs and some weird VLOOKUP thing that takes you 2 hours per client or for yourself, just have a central database. You can immediately pull the new fresh web scrape, pull it into Clay, and then immediately press a button and it just tells you what is a duplicate or not a duplicate. You can deduplicate in ReviOps 300,000 contacts in 3 minutes. You can do it in Clay just by literally running a formula with a webhook into our database, a get function into our database, and you can find out if the fresh web scrape you just loaded to Clay is in fact fresh, and you can do all the things we just described here. We believe you can cut the speed in half for your data cleaning and data duplication just by using a central database like the one we've built. Now, this isn't easy to do. You can't just replicate this in Airtable. You need something that's performant, that can handle hundreds of thousands, if not millions of rows at once, that is extremely fast and is able to duplicate across multiple databases at once. That requires high levels of integrations, stability in your data schema, and a real understanding of outbound. And we've done that for you. Go ahead and check out ReviOps.com. We're taking on beta users right now. The primary use case right now is being able to have one central place where you can deduplicate all your records to double the output of your GTM team. I will see you guys in ReviOps.com. Hopefully we get to do a beta trial with you guys. See ya.